Hello, this is a webinar on Universal Design for Learning and the Indiana Academic Standards for English, Language Arts, and Mathematics for 2014. This is part of the IMAS Transition series of webinars through the Indiana Department of Education.
Our purpose today is to unwrap the Universal Design for Learning, or UDL, what it is, how it impacts students, daily instruction, assessment, and the testing environment. We will talk about the new testing, accommodations, modifications, and the big challenge ahead.
So I'm Daniel McNulty. I'm the State Director for the PATINS Project and the Indiana Center for Accessible Materials.
And I'm Julie Kuhn, Coordinator for the Northeast section of the state, and my email is right there as well.
And those email addresses are important if you would like to contact us in the future. This will be a fairly brief webinar, but we're happy to provide additional information going forward.
Modifications versus accommodations. Sometimes there's confusion about that. So to clarify, a modification is when general education, curriculum, or learning expectation is altered. If a student is taught something different or at a different level of complexity, reduced number of answers, or a lower level reading book, then the curriculum has been modified. An accommodation is when support is in place, enabling a student to fully engage in the grade level curriculum. This accommodates for the disability, but does not modify the content. For testing, this means presentation, equipment materials, response, setting, timing, and scheduling. State and local assessments must, to the greatest extent possible, be administered using universal design principles.
We have these three terms that are quite often confused and intertwined, and they're certainly related, but this visual, I think, lends a little bit of understanding. And so if we look on the far left to Universal Design for Learning, that's a photograph of the Guggenheim Museum. And what that is a building that was built from the ground up to be as accessible as possible from the very start, without hiring an architect to come in later and address problems with the building. They built it to be accessible from the ground up. So UDL are principles that address problems with the curriculum and the learning environment. UDL can require some assistive tech for implementation. As we go to the middle, we look at the materials. So in Indiana, that's the Indiana Center for Accessible Materials. And these are the materials themselves and how accessible they are to a particular student, versus assistive tech on the far right. And so those are the tools themselves. So in my mind, those are kind of like Band-Aids. They're applicable to individual students in a particular situation. They certainly serve a purpose, but they get old and they become outdated and they have to be replaced. But they can be required to implement some accessible instructional materials within a universally designed environment. And if we were to take Universal Design for Learning and break it down into three very simple bullet points, it's providing multiple and flexible means of presenting information to students, multiple and flexible means of allowing students to provide their responses, and multiple and flexible means of engaging students in the curriculum. We have the physical access component, and within that we have the materials themselves, the methods the instructor uses, and the tools the instructor uses, and the assessment. So the assessment itself as well as the administration of the assessment. And then we have the cognitive access piece as well. So in my mind, the physical access piece is a little bit more concrete. You can usually see it happening, you can experience it, and then the cognitive access is a little bit more obscure, and so we have to maybe spend a little bit more time on that. So as an example, the physical access might be physically accessing the material. So a student who's blind, for example, can't see a printed textbook, and so we need to present that to the student in an alternate format. Or a student who can't carry the textbook, we need to present that to that student in an alternate format. But cognitive access as well. So it's important that we still address grade level standards, but we have to do something with that to make it cognitively accessible. Even though there's certain accommodations that are allowed on the test, we may have 5 days of testing, and so we like to use this term 175 versus 5. So 175 refers to the rest of the school year, whereas the 5 refers to maybe those 5 days of testing. And so even though during those 5 days of testing we may have this specific test allowed accommodations, during those 175 days we have a lot more things available to us. And so one thing that we hear from teachers sometimes is that, well, if it's not allowed on the 5 days of testing, I can't really do it on the other 175. There couldn't be anything further from the truth as far as doing what's best for kids and doing what's best to help that student achieve a higher level on those 5 days of testing. And so what we like to talk about is During those 175 days, if we're providing students access to the content in a way that they can cognitively access and physically access, then it just makes sense that on those 5 days of testing, they're going to do better than if they didn't have access to that content. Even if, during those 5 days of testing, we have to take away some of those accommodations they have been using for 175 days. So that's where universal design for learning really comes into play in this whole transition, this whole IMAS transition that the state is making. So really what we want to do is design a curriculum and a learning environment that's as universally designed as possible during those 175 days, so that even if we have to remove a few of those accommodations during those 5 days, the student's still far more likely to do better on that testing than if they hadn't had access to that content physically and cognitively during the rest of the school year.
Students have very limited experience with applied skills and high-stakes assessment. And these are students that have been taking the IMAST and have done well on IMAST oftentimes. There are spelling barriers, limited vocabulary, limited life experience. IMAST was paper-based, and now it will be online, which is also involving some new skills. So we need to recognize those changes and help students be prepared for them. Allowed testing accommodations are limited, as Daniel said, and instructors may have more experience in remediating skills for students in the past than accommodating to meet the grade level requirements that this new testing will require.
Absolutely, and so there's some barriers or some issues here relating to the students and potentially also to the environment and the way that instructors have been remediating in the past. So what we've done is chosen one of the new Indiana academic standards in language arts, and we'll kind of use this as an example to break down a standard and show how it can be made a little bit more cognitively and possibly physically accessible to a student. So the standard is describe 2 or more characters, settings, or events in a story or play, drawing on specific details in the text and how they impact the plot. And so what we'll do is use this pyramid guide as a way to sort of unwrap this standard and make it feel a little more accessible and approachable to possibly all students. And so what we have across the bottom is what all students in the classroom are going to do. And then in the middle, we've got what most students will be able to do. And then at the top, we've got what some of those students who are achieving to a super high level will be able to do. So as an example, what all students will do will be able to name or graphically represent 2 characters. So they're either going to name 2 characters, or they'll be able to draw 2 characters, or graphically represent them in some other way, identify them in the text, so be able to find them in the text, and whether or not they are a protagonist or an antagonist in that story. So really that addresses that standard, but it addresses it to a more global, kind of broad level. And then if we go up to that middle category, what most students in my classroom are going to do is describe 2 characters. So rather than just name them or graphically represent them, they're going to describe 2 characters, events, or settings with at least 2 supporting details from the text and how and why they are in the story. So a little bit more detailed, a little bit more information. That's what the majority of students in my classroom are going to do. And then the top level students are going to do a little bit more. So those top level students are going to develop a sequel or a following story or a chapter that builds on the story they've just read, utilizing at least 2 characters from the previous story and incorporating at least 1 event and connecting the new setting to the previous story, and add at least 1 supporting graphic or drawing or computer-generated art or music or digital video of something of that nature. So we've taken this one standard and we've really broken it down to what every student in the classroom is going to be able to do, and then what the majority is going to be able to do, and then those students who are going to be done in 10 minutes and then need to move on to something deeper, we've got something for them as well. So that's really taking that standard and making it feel more universally designed by using this pyramid model.
Now we're talking about what all students will do when we talk about universal design for learning strategies and methods. So that all students will have choices in locations and seating. If someone needs to be up front in the class, then that would be absolutely wonderful. Seating accommodations as far as positioning, and some kids need to stand. That works pretty well in the younger grades. Some students need to have better support, and some kids need more room for wiggling. Varied writing utensils and paper. Some students need to use graph paper to keep their math work aligned. Other students need felt tip pens so that they're not writing so hard on the paper. Others would benefit from various types of writing devices. There may be a need for typed or talking word processing, text-to-speech, dictation, various alternatives that way. Some kids are going to be faster and more proficient, and other kids will be more proficient with handwriting. Instead of everyone doing the same project, there may be an avenue for some varieties, so students can show their learning style through their work and work to their strength. Advanced background information. This is where, given some advanced information about the task, students can take that and go with the assignment even further and blossom. Post-lesson enhancement is taking those advanced students and giving them work to do beyond the standard task. Information presented auditorily, visually, kinesthetically, and available outside the classroom. So this is really addressing the full learner.
One thing that I like to ask teachers that I work with is, how many of you have your best ideas during the hours of 8 and 3 p.m.? And rarely, and I ask that to hundreds of teachers every year, and rarely do I even get one hand of a teacher who says, I have my best ideas always between 8 and 3. Yet that's what we ask our students to do. And so extending the learning experience outside of the four walls of a classroom is something I'm really for. And I think we can do that with the variety of and ease of digital tools that we have at our disposal here in 2014. I think we can do that, and then we can give our students the chance to interact with that curriculum outside of the four walls of our classroom by using things like blogs and wikis and Twitter and some of the social media avenues that we have that really kind of create more avenues, more opportunities, more flexibility, and make that curriculum and that learning experience more universally designed. So those are some strategies, and now we'll talk a little bit about some specific tools.
Really, all kids anymore do have access to keyboards. I talked a little bit about a talking word processor or text-to-speech. These are readily available in most schools these days. There's drawing tools, Wikipedia tools that are great for research, highlighters, both digital and conventional. We thought we would show a little iPad presentation.
So we're looking at Julie's iPad here, and she's going to bring up a book in iBooks, and of course iBooks is the book app that comes from Apple and is free.
This is actually Holes, and this is starting to talk about Stanley Yelnats, obviously under a curse. So what I'm going to do right now is just highlight Stanley. I'm going to select the part I want read, and I have some options here, and one of the options is to speak the selection. And thank you. And so I can select that, and it's only going to speak the highlighted part I've selected.
Stanley Yelnats is under a curse.
And apparently in a British accent, he's under a curse. So that's one option. And this is speak selection in an iPad. Other tablets have similar kind of options, but this part is only going to talk the selection that I've chosen. And it can speak a word. It also has define, I can highlight, I can add a note.
So Julie, you just typed that note
I
using a
did.
keyboard.
Mm-hmm.
What if you couldn't use a keyboard?
Right next to my space bar is a microphone. I've selected it. It's recording what I'm saying right now. As you could tell by the wavy line, I'm pushed done. And it's actually selected, it's saying selected, it's recording what I'm saying right now, is you could tell by the wavy line, the way line. So it's not always going to be perfect, but I also wasn't pointedly trying to dictate the way I meant to. It doesn't always have to be perfect. It gives you the context of what you're trying to say and you get the idea across.
So this could potentially be a way for, the little notes I mean, could
Mm-hmm.
potentially be a way for a teacher to put in prompts or questions ahead of time. So a way for a teacher to present information to students alternatively, but a student can also go in and do that themselves using the on-screen keyboard, the external keyboard, or the speech-to-text, as Julie was using, as an alternate way of responding. So remember we talked about UDL being multiple and flexible ways of presenting, of students responding, and of engaging. So we could go on and on about the tools that are available in iBooks, but again, it's free, and so this book is an accessible book available through the ICAM for qualifying students. And I want to show you a few quick tools within Wikipedia. So I'm going to choose English language, and I'm just going to do a search for Indiana. And so I'm going to scroll through here real quick and show you how much information is available when you search Indiana. That's an overwhelming amount of information for just about anyone, let alone a student who has a reading disability, a print disability, a cognitive disability. And so one thing I like to show folks is over here along the left-hand side under languages, if we come down to the S's and we look for Simple English, which is right there, I can click that and I'll show you what happens. It takes that large amount of information about Indiana and it boils it down to just that. So how it decides what to keep, what to throw out, I can't really answer, and how accurate that is. What I do know is in one simple click, that could be the difference between a meltdown for a student and a student staying engaged in the curriculum. And so to me, that's an example of finding multiple and flexible ways of engaging my students in curriculum who have possibly had a history of being disengaged in the curriculum because it's not accessible to them. The other quick Wikipedia tool is also over here on the left-hand side under Print Export. I click Make a Book, Start Book Creator, and then at the top of each page that I go to in Wikipedia, I have this option to add a page to my book. And then I can go search for something else. So we'll do a search for Ohio. I can add this page to my book. We can do a search for Michigan, and I can add this page to my book. And then I can show my book. I can give it a title, I can give it a subtitle, I can organize it by chapters. If I'd like to, I can create chapters. Over here in the far right-hand bottom corner, I can download it as a PDF or as an EPUB, and those are the two formats we're primarily going to want to use. And so I can just choose which one of those I want, and EPUB, by the way, is the format that will go on iPads and almost all devices except for Kindles. So then I just click download, and then I can transfer that onto my device like an iPad, bring it into iBooks like Julie was showing, and have it be fully accessible. I do want to show one of my other favorite tools. It's a word prediction software, and there are several different word prediction pieces of software out there. The one that I have the most familiarity with is called CoWriter. When it's running, it just looks like this. There's just a box that floats over whatever it is you're typing into. So that could be a Word document like I have here, a spreadsheet, a website, an email, anything else that you're typing into. And if I'm going to type the sentence, "My name is Daniel," I start typing an M, and then it brings up choices. And you can have it bring up to 9 choices. And as I hover over these, my computer will read them to me. And when I hear the word that I want, I can click it, or I can just type the number next to it, and it puts it in there. So my name, the choice that I want isn't in there, so I have to try and come up with the beginning sound. And I come up with an N, and then I can hover over my choices, and there it is, and I'm just clicking at this point. Move this out of my way. If I type Daniel, it's probably not going to know what I'm trying to type, so I'm going to have to come up with a little bit more. But then as I punctuate my sentence, my computer will read that entire sentence to me.
My name is Daniel.
So what that little piece of software does is called word prediction, and it used to be strictly a special ed type of technology, but now it's on every cell phone. You can't buy a cell phone that doesn't have word prediction in it. And so it's really a universally designed type of tool. What it does is removes that spelling barrier. And so one of the big issues we anticipate students having with having to write on the new assessment is having never written in the past and having these spelling barriers. And so as students write more and more using something like word prediction software through those 175 days, even if you have to take that word prediction software away on that 5 days of assessment, they're going to be better writers than they were without having done that with word prediction for 175 days.
Another example of that is they may have only used the word pasta because that's all they can spell. But with word prediction, they may choose spaghetti or fettuccine, and that's a more robust term and more accurate and higher level skill. And then they may at least try to use that word on the test instead of always selecting the simpler pasta.
And so we mentioned as our top level in that peer, some of those students going way above and beyond and developing a sequel story to what they've just read. A perfect tool that comes on Apple computers is iAuthor. And the reason we like iAuthor, and we could spend a long time going into how iAuthor works and how easy it is, but the really big reason why we like iAuthor is because it makes it it makes it very simple for a student or a teacher to create an accessible book. So anybody can go in and create a document in Microsoft Word or something else, but really making it accessible and able to be put on a variety of devices is a little bit more difficult. iAuthor does that pretty simply. And so again, we can do an hour trainings, half an hour trainings, half day, full day trainings on just about all this stuff and how to incorporate it into a more universally designed model for those 175 days to create a more robust vocabulary, like Julie said, and writing tools and abilities that are present for those 5 days of testing. These are, like we mentioned earlier, available through the Indiana Center for Accessible Materials, and the website is there at the bottom. It's just www.icam.k12.in.us, and the formats that are required both in IDEA, the federal law, and in Indiana's Article 7 are Braille, large print, digital text, audio, captions, video, tactile graphics, and audio descriptions. So those are the formats that we can help you with through the ICAM and through the 5 PATINS sites to make the materials themselves more accessible to all of your students.
These are excellent resources that are available for assessment and accommodations. We have our PATINS project website, the ICAM website, and then some UDL information that we have shared. And speaking of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, CAST started it all, so their CAST website is shown. And then also the National Universal Design for Learning Center website. So all of that information should help you understand and have a refresh your memory and give you some concrete information as you go forth.
If you don't know where to begin, or if you've got a great idea and don't know how to implement it, and just call us. Just get in touch with PATINS Project. Any of our staff will be happy to help you, making those 175 days more productive and rich, so that those 5 days of testing really are more beneficial to everyone. So thank you for your time.